blockbuster release.
Panama Papers.
The documents were leaked to the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung.
We turn now to the banking bombshell causing shockwaves around the world.
Edward Snowden calling it the biggest leak in the history of data journalism.
We need months of research, of fact-checking, of really digging into these files in order to find those stories of public interest that are going to make an impact on society.
Als es so Richtung 100 Gigabyte ging, haben wir verstanden, dass daraus echt große Geschichten werden. Und als es mehr als 1 Terabyte war, haben wir verstanden, dass sehr viele, sehr große Geschichten darin stecken.
Und natürlich stieg die Aufregung und das Leuchten, glaube ich, in unseren Augen, als wir gemerkt haben, da ist auch nicht nur eine Spur zu einem Staatschef drin, sondern zu Dutzenden Staatschefs.
We were working with more than 100 media organizations in more than 70 countries. They're still publishing stories. And then, of course, it's up to the authorities to decide what to do. Our job as journalists at that point is done. We have revealed what we have seen.
That's it. We're done. Thanks very much.
So the biggest leak in the history of data journalism just went live, and it's about corruption. So tweeted NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden about the Panama Papers, which were released in April, revealing how the rich and powerful in numerous countries use tax havens to hide their wealth. Some 11.5 million files were leaked from one of the world's most secretive offshore companies, Mossack Fonseca, a law firm based in Panama, and passed to a German newspaper, Süddeutsche Zeitung. Did I say that right? Yes. And then poured over by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The revelations implicating 12 heads of state, a number of other politicians, family members, close associates, including friends of Russian President Vladimir Putin, relatives of the prime ministers of Britain, Iceland, Pakistan, and the president of Ukraine. One of the largest protests in Iceland's history demanded the resignation of the prime minister, which happened very quickly, forcing him to step down after the leaked files revealed he and his wife were hiding investments worth millions of dollars behind a secretive offshore company. Today, we're going to talk to the people who released this information and the unique collaboration of investigative journalism that was responsible for this. We're joined by Peter Bale, who is CEO of the Center for Public Integrity, and also Michael Hudson, who is the senior editor at the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. And we welcome you both. Peter Bale, talk about your involvement, the Center for Public Integrity, and how you came to be involved in the Panama Papers.
The Center was founded 27 years ago by Chuck Lewis, who many people in this room will know. And in '97, he founded the ICIJ as a project of the Center for Public Integrity. And it's really grown to be the international arm, if you like, of the Center for Public Integrity. I took over 15 months ago. I don't think I would have come to do the job without the ICIJ being there. It is an extraordinary, it's a different business model from the one we run based on public integrity journalism. It is incredibly light. It really only has a team of about 11 doing this work. It's incredibly technology driven and collaboratively driven, and that's what really appeals to me about it. I think it's a new model for journalism. So the center provides the executive wing, if you like. It provides all the staffing and the back end and the back office, and does all the fundraising for the ICIJ. So overall, the center is about a $10 million a year operation, $8 to $10 million a year, and the ICIJ accounts for about 25% of that. So it's about the same size as the effort that we put into money in politics in the US. Hopefully, of course, with a project as big as this, the Panama Papers, that will grow. And really the idea is to try and put as much effort behind the ICIJ now to let it become as big as possible.
So Michael Hudson, talk about how you got a hold of these papers and the work that you did. What was the model of investigation you used, and then the effect of these papers?
You know, this didn't just happen, just suddenly this plopped in our lap. We have done, over the past 5 years, we've done, this is essentially our 5th sort of offshore leak-based projects. The first project was just called Offshore Leaks, then China Leaks, Lux Leaks, Swiss Leaks, and finally Panama Papers. And the key was, we were getting never before seen information about who owns, who controls offshore bank accounts, offshore companies, and in some cases about tax deals that large corporations. In the LuxLeaks case, in the Luxembourg leaks case, it was Pepsi and the Koch brothers empire and others about how they were getting special tax deals, often able to essentially, on paper, move their profits to Luxembourg and pay tax rates of 1% or slightly more. So we had developed this track record of doing these kind of stories, and really a set of best practices, and sometimes through trial and error. Who are the best partners to work with? How's the best way that we work together? How do we publish together? How do you take these large data sets, which often come in, they're corrupted, they're password protected, all these kind of technological problems. How do you deal with these? How do you create a system in which a large team of reporters, in this case, more than 370 journalists, from nearly 80 news organizations, from more than 100 news organizations in nearly 80 countries. How do you set up the data? How do you create online tools that are secure but also allow sort of rich communication among people? So as you saw from the video, when the size of the data, the natural response of most journalists is, great story, this is mine. I'll get it out to the world eventually, but it's all mine. But you saw when, I think he said, 1 terabyte? When the size of the data, and I think just the richness, the number of names, the number of world leaders, the number of politicians, the number of countries involved got so large, they said, we need to go back to ICJ. And we had worked with Süddeutsche, we'd worked with the Germans on 5 different, on 4 previous leak projects, in addition to a non-leak project, our investigation of the World Bank and human rights. Süddeutsche had been a big part of that. So they knew us, they trusted us, and they knew that we would work with them, and we wouldn't take the data and run and sort of leave them in the wake, but it was going to be a true collaboration.
Yeah, I think that trust element is critical to this, and it is the trust built over 4 years, but it's also the leak didn't leak. The most extraordinary thing is that the leak did not leak, so that the ICIJ provided this platform, but none of the people who signed up for it wanted to take the risk of being the one who broke that magic circle, and that is a remarkable achievement for Mike, Gerard Ryle, the director, and Marina, to have kept that organization really based on trust going for that full year.
And talk about the political implications of the data that you had.
We had 12 world leaders, that's kings, prime ministers, or presidents, directly linked to offshore entities. We also had dozens of other world leaders who, the people around them, in this case Putin, people very close to them, family members, associates. In the case of Putin, it was the godfather of his eldest daughter. It had a big impact. Did it have an impact in Russia? I mean, it's very possible that these stories made him stronger in Russia, because he was able to say, look at these Western journalists are attacking Russia. But in a democracy like Iceland, it had real and immediate impact. There have been police raids in Switzerland. There have been police raids in Panama and other countries. There's talk about new legislation. President Obama has talked about sort of cracking down on offshore. And one of the things you've seen in the sort of history of offshore is every 5 or 10 years, there's this idea, this is, we're going to crack down. This is the end of offshore. You come back, flash forward 5 years later. Something has changed, but not a lot, because the offshore system has the ability to morph and come up with new ways of doing things, and sort of keep the game going.
It implicated David Cameron, the former prime minister, or the prime minister about to resign of Britain.
Some of our original reporting in the offshore leaks, he had said we need to really crack down on the havens like the Caymans, the British Virgin Islands that are British flagged. and we're going to put pressure on them, and they passed a little bit of legislation, and then he said, oh, well, they're okay now, they're no longer tax havens. But now, because of these new revelations, it's sort of pressure it came back on him, and we'll see whether he's going to be in office in a few months. But
and what about people in the United States?
in the United States, this has really, for the first time, our reporting has really, drawn attention. We're hearing, the U.S. attorney here in Manhattan is investigating possible possible criminal violations, and the Obama administration is really going to push through, not only dealing with offshore havens, literally offshore America, but our sort of internal havens, places like Delaware and Nevada and Wyoming that actually act as secrecy havens, financial havens, where you can set up an LLC and not tell who you really are. It can be totally cloaked.
Very important, just thinking about also Kurt's comments before, extremely important to remind everybody that we went into this with a public interest lens. That's why it's Putin. Putin happens to be the president of Russia. There's high public interest in that. Virtually everybody that we named and identified in our stories were major public figures, and that's why we did it, and that's why, in a sense, this project could not be done anywhere else other than where you have First Amendment protection. But it's extremely important to remember that we remain journalists in this role. We happen to have become the trusted people to leak stories about offshore too, or documents about offshore too, but we're not advocates. It's now up to the advocates and the regulators to take action on this. It's very much a journalistic public interest exercise as far as we're concerned.
And what we've done is we sort of leveraged the First Amendment protections, which aren't perfect, which still have but the sort of the freedom to publish in the United States is sort of being leveraged around the world, because now in countries where there's much tighter press control, if something's published elsewhere, suddenly the heat's off them. The government can't stop them. It's already out of the bag, and also they can cite the fact that it's published internationally to go ahead and publish there.
So let's open this discussion to the floor. First person asking a question.
I'll ask one real quick while they're gathering their thoughts. Peter, you were at the Logan Symposium on Investigative Journalism for 3 days prior to announcing to that room the Panama Papers.
Yeah.
How hard was it to keep that secret?
Well, I'd already sat on it for a year. I deliberately, so Jared told me about the scale of it, I think the previous May. I knew the name of the company, and then I tried not to know very much more, other than the scale of the project and the number of people working on it, because I didn't want to be the person myself to accidentally blurt it out, at a dinner party or at an event.
Great poker face.
But yeah, so it was pretty extraordinary to announce it there. But really, the only reason Jared wasn't there is that he was back pulling the levers on getting the thing out. The whole thing went out. I think it was 2 p.m. Washington time. Nobody leaked it. Everything was out pretty much within 20 minutes of that.
Right. And you have to remember that to be part of our partnership, we are offering something in this case, we offered something very valuable, which was the leaked information. We also, the collaboration model, the network of partners. And so there was an implicit threat there with our members. If you do violate this, you could be voted off the island of collaboration. But I think more than that, there was really this sort of peer pressure in a positive way, constructive peer pressure. If one reporter, you don't want to share your information, but we had an online password secured forum that was sort of like we like to call a Facebook for journalists, for investigative reporters. Somebody finds a post and says, I just found politician A connected to company X, and someone else jumps on and says, well, I just found politician C connected to company X, and someone else jumps on and says, oh, well, if you do this search and look for this kind of document, you might find other details of this, and on and on. And people just, when they found Lionel Messi, the forum went crazy, and somebody, posted just goal, just like people were, so there was this, but also it's like, if she's sharing, I'm going to share too, if the Australians are sharing, then, I'm from Norway, I'm going to share too, and so on. And so it created this sense of a community, which was very cool because, often investigative reporters, we're different. ICIJ and Center for Public Integrity are different because we're sort of an organization of investigative reporters, but in most places, investigative reporters are isolated. And so it created this real sort of sense of, they're sort of the nerds and punks and the artsy types at the high school who feel isolated and singular, where they go out and create their own communities.
Why didn't the New York Times participate in this?
The New York Times didn't participate because we didn't ask them, because we had worked with them or talked to them extensively on the previous projects, and they weren't ready at that point to collaborate. And there was understandable, these sort of leak projects were new, the whole idea of collaboration was new. What we have found is that internationally, media have been much more willing and eager to collaborate, but the U.S. have been less so. But that is really changing, because we had, now the Washington Post and the New York Times, since the original publication, now they're participating. We've had all the other major players who originally said, well, we could collaborate, but we really can't share information back and forth. You give us the data, and we'll publish, and we'll give you credit, which we don't consider collaboration. But the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, all these folks have come to us and said, we want to collaborate now. We've changed our minds. So we think one thing that we've done, in addition to just sort of creating this model, we're also encouraging other people, other news media, to think of collaboration. It's a new world, and I don't think large collaborative projects are the solution, but they are one of the solutions, one of the things in the toolbox to dealing with where we are now.
Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm with the Gates Foundation. So on the question of collaboration, how do you, a little more on how you get them to feel more at ease coming into editorial collaborations? And I'm asking this question against the backdrop of potential grantees that we want to work with. So you identify grantee A, prospective grantee A, who are very strong in one particular aspect, and they will be helpful in getting particular outcomes. But those outcomes would be even more amplified if they collaborated with prospective grantee B, who is stronger in something else. But getting the two together without making it feel like you forced them together, so they're only doing it because you, who has the grant, the money which they want that. So they do it really for you rather than for them. Trying to get seed that idea so they think it's their idea rather than yours.
Alex, let me take that, and Michael chip in. I can give you a very good example of this transition. So we have a fantastic Africa editor called Will Fitzgibbon, who's done a project last year called Fatal Extraction. And one of the things that I love about the ICIJ, it is not just a one-trick pony. It has done two of the biggest stories in the world in the last 2 years, Swiss Leaks and then this. But it has done a number of other projects which are more kind of fundamentally journalistic, if you like. Fatal Extraction is about the destruction of the environment and human rights in Africa by Australian mining companies. A dozen African journalists connected to us from an organization called ANSIA worked on that. Each one of those has then progressed through being trained up in the ICIJ's methodologies into the Panama Papers. So they're now moving through a set of stories they could never otherwise have done. And those are the people who will break the big news about Angola or Malawi or Nigeria or South Africa. So when I look at it from a donor's point of view, which I do all the time, I have a sort of phrase that I use with my team, which is that we're trying to do great journalism on great technology with committed donors. And this is a perfect example of those things working together. The journalism comes first. This could not have been done without the underlying technology, but it also has fabulous donors. OSF, Edesium, Sigurd Rousing, and now Ford are very strongly behind this, amongst others, to support this work, and it's bound together. We obviously, none of our donors until maybe a couple of days before this were released knew about the project itself. They kind of trusted us to know what we were doing. But I do think in terms of impact, and I'm thinking about this in the kind of work that Gates does, if you could see those dozen African journalists move from being kind of lonely individuals working right around the continent, connected through UNSIA, but then doing what Jared calls training through doing. They moved through Fatal Extraction, a whole published project, hugely significant, and then up into the Panama Papers, and they're now effectively fully fledged investigative journalists, if you like. So there is a terrific progression from a value for money point of view if you're looking at it from the philanthropy side.
So if I may just a quick follow-up. So it sounds to me like the idea is to package it with the journalism coming first and to help them to understand that the collaboration is great for your journalism, let alone anything else. Even if there was no money involved or anything, it just makes you a better journalist.
That's correct. And in this case, we're breaking down 11.5 million documents. we haven't got anywhere near the bottom of that yet. That's one of the reasons why it's easy to go for the public interest aspect first. And you'll see from some of the work that will come out in the next couple of months on this, some of the work the New York Times has done recently is more about less public figures and just about the phenomenon of what these documents reveal. And you'll see a lot more of that coming. But I think I believe that this has strong application to US journalism as well, particularly state journalism.
And I think the key is I mean, we are, people are learning, people are getting sort of training on the job, but they're also training us. They're teaching us about media law and politics and resource usage in East Africa and Southeast Asia, all over the world. So everyone is learning. ICIJ is learning stuff every day from our partners, and our partners are teaching. A Swiss partner is learning from a partner in Nigeria. A partner in Nigeria is learning from a partner in Cambodia. It's and you talk about isolation. Yes, a lone investigative reporter at a daily newspaper here may feel isolated, but the idea of reporters in some countries where the challenges are just so incredible in terms of training, in terms of resources, in terms of the just the idea that if you write something that someone powerful doesn't like, they're going to call you a spy, they're going to throw you in jail, they're going to kill you, they're going to kill your family. I mean, but folks who are brave enough to do this, we're really happy to provide them some sort of support, to make them part of an international network and have international support for them when there's pressure put on them. They still, we're not solving any problems for them, but we are trying to help them do the best journalism they can under really, really difficult circumstances.
Let's take a last question, if anyone has one. I'm sorry if I don't. Ben?
I've got one way if no one does.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to make sure no one else does. Okay. So in fostering the collaboration, to what extent did you find there was a difference of opinion between the newsroom folk, so the editors and all that, and the management, the media owners? So you find the editors and everything can see the value of working together to make this work, but the media owners and the managers from a business point of view think, hey, I don't want to do that. That's the competition, and it doesn't make business sense to me.
I can tell you, we try to work directly with the journalists because, again, they're the experts on how to get a story in their paper, how to get a story aired. So we try to work with journalists who have that track record of fighting through all these roadblocks, including media owners who maybe are nervous about doing these kind of stories or don't want to do these stories.
Or might be implicated themselves.
Right, or might be implicated, and that has happened on some. And we had one of our on the World Bank project where we're investigating the World Bank's human rights record. We had one reporter who was really hot to do the story, and she went to her editors and said, and this was about people, especially indigenous groups, being evicted, having their lives changed by large development projects like dams and power plants. And she went to her editors, to try to sell them on letting her do the story, and they said, that happens all the time. That's not really a story. So in that case, instead of working with somebody locally, we did get a grant, find a grant, in this case from the Nation Institute's Investigative Fund, and send somebody there to do the work, because in that case we couldn't find. But usually, I mean that's part of being an investigative reporter, is figuring out how to get the stories out there.
Did any government crack down on the newspaper that released this information?
We don't think so.
Well, in the case of the Panama Papers, the Ecuadorian papers were pretty extraordinary. They attacked the entire project. I think you'll see with some of the stories that will be coming out fairly soon that there'll be other governments that will attack us for doing the story.
The Ecuadorian newspapers and journalists, or the government?
The media, yeah.
There's a direct connection between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And in China Leaks, we had partners in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China, and about halfway through the project, and we were very careful in security. We had meetings outside of China and secure communication and everything. And about halfway through the project, we got a message from our China mainland China partner says, you know, the government is aware of what we're doing and we have to stop. And so they had to pull. So they did have to pull out. And then when the China leaks story went out, China did, you know, this extraordinary effort to block any, you know, any search terms that would allow our store to get in. All our websites, ICIJ, The Guardian, all the partners' websites were blocked by China. But of course, what happened is that media freedom activists created encrypted, unsearchable PDF versions of our stories, which then could be emailed around without getting caught in the search filters of all the censors. So it's always a battle to get these things out, but you just keep pushing.
Well, Michael Hudson and Peter Bow, your work has been extraordinary, and I'd like to encourage people, if you want to see further discussions about it, go to the Center for Public Integrity, and also on Kurt Guyette to go to the ACLU of Michigan, but also at democracynow.org, where we broadcast our interviews when these stories broke.
And Amy, if I could just say thank you to the donors in this room who support us, both the Center for Public Integrity and the ICIJ. It would be impossible to do all of these projects without your backing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let me just add my thanks, Amy, for leading a really great set of conversations. We knew you'd do a great job, and we also made it easy for you because her studios, her really excellent studios, are right around the corner, so she really couldn't refuse our invitation. And Amy is here with her colleague, Erin, who'd be happy, I'm sure, to give a tour of the great facilities right around the corner.
You know, if anyone wants to come by tomorrow morning when I'm co-hosting with Juan Gonzalez, the great journalist, you're all welcome. We're at 207 West 25th Street at 7th and 25th, and we do the broadcast every morning at 8 to 9. So you're welcome to come on over.
It's great fun to watch it. They've got a nice little setup for that, and they won't hold the time either. Funders are usually late, but they're going to do it at 8. Anyway,
yeah, it's going to happen.
And I just want to make one other point, connecting some dots. We'll be covering a lot of documentary films throughout the day, and one thing that maybe everybody knows that Amy is covering the news every day, but she has a very intense focus on documentaries, much more than usual news outlets, and every year she also goes to Sundance and covers it for a full week too, so that's a really important contribution to the field. Thank you for that as well. And be sure